FORA.tv. The world is thinking.
And as I worked on the book and looked back at the build-up to the war, one of the things that I did was look back and say, was it simply the decision to go to war that was the reason that this administration went so badly off course? Was it simply the decision that why the president's popularity is so low today? Or was it something more? Was it the way we took the nation to war? And by embracing a political marketing campaign or political propaganda campaign to sell it to the American people, and in the process, what happened was that the administration shunned candor and openness with the American people. And I think that's the reason, as much as any other, that this president has lost public trust, and it has been so low for so long. I get asked often about whether I think it was a deliberate campaign to mislead the American people. I don't think that the president and his top advisors were sitting in a room during the build-up to the war, certainly not Colin Powell and others like that, sitting around saying, let's figure out how we can mislead the American people into war. Now, I can't vouch for every individual or every individual's motives and intent, and certainly those are questions that remain because of some of the actions that we've seen, and some of the suspicion remains because of the lack of transparency within this administration. But the focus among the president and his top advisors became, how do we make the strongest case for taking the nation to war? And in the process, they believed that they could market the war to the American people, much like we did education reforms, much like we did tax cuts, and much like we later would do with Social Security. It was all about selling it to the American people and not embracing a high level of openness and candor, and not talking openly about the truth of the situation as best we knew it at the time, talking about the qualifications, talking about the caveats in the intelligence, and talking with the American people about the consequences, the cost, and the risk of going to war in a very open manner. Back in early September '02, remember White House Chief of Staff Andy Card went out and said, you don't begin a marketing campaign in August, and that's why we stepped up the effort to sell war to the American people beginning in September of 2002, but we began laying the groundwork much before that. And then, of course, Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz later said publicly that the one issue that everybody could agree on was about weapons of mass destruction. Now, he also acknowledged that there was some disagreement about the connections to terrorism, which, of course, made it a more urgent and serious threat to sell to the American people. And the White House Iraq Group was something that was set up as we began to sell war to the American people. It was the marketing arm of selling that war to the American people, a strategic communications group that included all the top advisors for the president as well, including the foreign policy team and the top communicators. Now, in build-up to the war, again, I was deputy. I participated in a couple of those meetings when my predecessor was out of town at the time and filled in for him from time to time in this effort to sell war to the American people. But it wasn't until later, when I became press secretary, that I was participating in that meeting on a regular basis. And it's not a meeting, again, where people are sitting around in a sinister way saying, let's figure out how we can deceive the American people. But it was very much focused on, how do we make the strongest case? How do we go about doing this with the American people? And they forgot about the importance of making sure during the war-making process, you've got to talk about, give the American people the truth as best you know it. And I think the recently released report by the Senate Intelligence Committee came out shortly after my book. It reached very much the same conclusions that I came to in my book, pointing out that much of the intelligence could be substantiated to some degree, but that in making the case, the administration overstated it and overpackaged the intelligence, especially when it came to implying a relationship with al-Qaeda, which could not be substantiated. So we took the nation to war by making it sound more urgent, more serious, and more grave than it actually was. It was not this idea of out-and-out deception, but shading of the truth, downplaying the major reason for going to war, which I can get to in some of the questions if you want to talk about, and emphasizing a lesser motivation that could be dealt with in other ways short of military confrontation, and trying to make the WMD threat and connection to terrorism a little more certain, a little less questionable than they were, quietly ignoring or disregarding crucial caveats and qualifications in the intelligence, and using innuendo and implication to encourage Americans to believe some things as fact that were unclear and possibly false, including the idea that Saddam Hussein had an active nuclear weapons program and a partnership with al-Qaeda. You might remember, of course, the Vice President probably went further out than anybody on some of the intelligence at one point early in the process, saying that Saddam Hussein is amassing weapons of mass destruction to use against people in the region, to use against our allies, and to use against the United States. Well, the truth is, we know the intelligence today was also saying Saddam Hussein is a survivalist. He wants to hold on to his power. He wants to hold on to his regime. And the last thing he wants to do is stir up the United States by attacking the United States, which would invoke a very strong response and probably cost him his power. But the goal became about winning the debate by shaping the narrative to get Congress and the public behind the decision as we pursued the goal and embracing honesty and candor with the American people about the potential war, its objectives, the full truth behind the intelligence, and its cost and risk came a distant second in that process. What happened was that we confused the political propaganda campaign with the realities of the war-making campaign, and as it was focused more on creating this sense of gravity and urgency about the threat rather than governing on the basis of the truth of the situation. And that's what's deeply troubling.